this movie come out? When does it say?
85.
85. Wow.
Hey guys, I'm Blake,
I'm Bryana.
and we're the Untitled Network. Today we're going to be talking about Silver Bullet, the Stephen King adaptation that was made into a film starring Gary Busey and Corey Haim. It was made in 1985. It's kind of one of the lesser known, I wouldn't say little known, but I'd say lesser known Stephen King movies. It is surprisingly pleasant to watch. It's a really nice watch. With the cast, it's got some people you're probably familiar with and some people you might not be familiar with. But the main players in the film are the two children, brother and sister, Marty Coslaw and Jane Coslaw. And then there is their uncle, which is just Uncle Red, and he's Gary Busey. But the children are Corey Haim and Megan Follows. And Corey Haim, you'll know him from all sorts of stuff. Most prominently things like The Lost Boys and Goonies. Of course, he has since passed away, rest in peace. But, you know, he gave us some really good works in the time, and this is one of those, I think. It's a really, really neat, interesting take on the story of a werewolf. It doesn't ask too much of its audience as far as accepting new things. It's not like watching Twilight, where you now have to stomach a great deal about what you need to believe that a vampire is, or a werewolf, you know. What are some things that you enjoyed about how the story was laid out?
I liked how simple it was. The movie was both a lot longer and a lot shorter than I thought it was going to be.
It's pretty short.
It's a very short movie. So we were getting close to the end, and I felt like there was another hour to it. I don't know what I was basing that off of, but it just seemed like there needed to be more.
Yeah.
And then you pointed out that it was almost over, and I was like, what?
Oh, yeah. It doesn't have a whole lot of narrative.
No.
There's not a lot of character development.
There's very, very little.
They don't tell you a lot about anybody who isn't Red or Corey Haim's character. Other than that, the story doesn't really care to take the time.
Because it takes place over, like, a week?
Something like that.
Ish, or something like that?
What we observe is no more than a week's worth of days.
Right.
That would be a good way of saying it. But it's a werewolf story, and it kind of follows your traditional ideas of what a werewolf is. Aside from the fact that there doesn't need to be a full moon, it seems that in this film the full moon amplifies the...
Which they do kind of explain that. That is something that they bring up later.
The nearer you get to a full moon, the harder it is to control the werewolf aspects of your person. And that comes to play in the very end because it does end on Halloween, and it's a full moon on Halloween. So it is a nice little Halloween watch if you want to think of it as such. It only comes into play in the third act, though, at the very end. You don't know much about anybody you're watching a story about. It's very akin to children's show, where it's just the bare basics. You're just, what's on the surface is everything you get. And that's all that they require of you as an audience member to intake. They're not wanting anything more than that. This feels very made for TV.
Yeah.
And not in any bad way. It still has a pretty fair budget. It makes use of its budget well, and the setting that it's in. A lot of the film is outdoors, and they shoot it well, and it captures the story well. The audio is really good because sound is a really big part of this, with the werewolf lurking and hunting. You know, so it wasn't restricted by money by any sense of the imagination, but when you watch it, you'll see that it's something that you would imagine would come on at like 7 p.m. on the USA Network or something like that. It's not really theatrically budgeted. It's not American Werewolf in London by any stretch of the imagination. But I will say that the werewolf transformation scenes in this movie are quite good.
Yeah,
they
that
look
was
great.
what I think I was most surprised with, was how they handled that.
Yeah.
Because it was like really gross and
Oh yeah, oof. Yeah.
painful to watch.
Pretty icky.
That made me uncomfortable, but like in a good way.
Well, they did it well because they did it with prosthetics and with the time lapse. So they did a combination of two things.
Yeah.
They did the prosthetic change like they did in American Werewolf in London, and then they did the time lapse to kind of show a rapid progression of it when he was reverting back into a human.
Ugh. I think that's the one that bothered me the most.
It's definitely a lot worse to watch him go back to human than it is to watch him turn into a werewolf. which is strange.
It's pretty gross.
Because it's usually the other way around. In fact, most of the time they don't actually show you someone changing back into the human.
Yeah.
Which is something I'll commend this movie for, because a lot of movies don't do that. And when they do, they try to use like CG or something like that. Mm-hmm. Warranted CG wasn't really something that they had available to them making this film, especially on such a restricted budget, but they did a really good job with what they had. Mm-hmm. And the transitions were pretty nice. Because the movie's kind of just a little whodunit. Like, who is the person who's the werewolf? Who is the person who's killing people? First of all, it starts out with not even telling you that there's a werewolf. It just kind of starts out, there's some monster. Mm-hmm. And then from there, it could be a serial killer or a monster. And the cops can't find anybody, and people in the city can't find anybody. And, you know, it just kind of starts developing until Marty, Corey Haim's character, kind of comes to the conclusion that it's a werewolf via little things that he's observed. Because nobody really gets a super great look at the werewolf until the very end, really. And if they do, they get killed immediately when they get the look at the werewolf. So it's more of a kind of mystery of them figuring out in the town who's doing what. Because it's a small town, and everyone's very affected by this. They don't make mention of it, but I'm sure it's in Maine.
Most likely. It's a Stephen King adaptation.
It honestly, it looks like it could be anywhere where there's like heavy pine trees and oak trees around. As far as the whodunit part, they don't develop the story enough for it to really work very well.
See, okay, I mean, obviously going into this movie, I already knew, okay, there's a werewolf. And
well, I mean, yeah, you know there's a werewolf. No, it's called Silver Bullet.
Yeah, so like you go into the movie already knowing, okay, there's a werewolf, and then, like I told you, the moment that the priest shows up,
oh yeah,
you just know it has to be him. It just has to be, and I don't even know what it was about him that gave that away to me. It was just, I don't know.
He has a very like gaunt, angular look about him. He looks villainous.
He does.
And then at
he's
one point,
he's very like sharp and.
Yeah, he's always got that like piercing gaze, unblinking kind of look. And at one point he loses an eye and he gets a black eye patch, which just kind of further enforces that he's a villain. It was kind of like he picked up an apple and took a bite. It's like, this is the bad guy.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's not, I mean, it's kind of just like a fun one to watch with like a group of friends or family.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like
it's not challenging by any stretch of the imagination.
Once he is shot in the eye, because he is shot in the eye with some kind of rocket that Marty has, like a firework, shoots him in the eye with it, and his sister figures out that he's the werewolf because he is the only one in town missing that eye. It's like from then on, it's not like they're trying to hide it from you anymore. It's just
they're very
all right, this is definitely him, and they just kind of like shove all this evidence.
Oh
you,
yeah,
like,
they have there's a scene where. Of course, our main character, Marty, is a paraplegic. He has no use of his legs. He's in a wheelchair. Silver Bullet refers to the name of his wheelchair. It's named the Silver Bullet. Specifically, the wheelchair that his Uncle Red builds for him is named the Silver Bullet, which is an enhanced wheelchair that's more like a dirt bike and can go quite fast enough to compete with like cars on the main road. There's a scene in which he is kind of just riding around in his wheelchair, and as he's doing so, the Reverend is kind of stalking him, like hunting him, in his car. And it gets to a point where Marty's on a road and on his own, and so the car is trying to run him off the road, essentially run him over and kill him. And that's a very intense scene, because this is the only time that you see the werewolf character attack someone while he's a human.
Yeah.
While he's a human, he's usually perfectly calm and like super nice and all this stuff. But he feels the need to kill this character because they know who he is. That's a really crazy scene right there when he chases down our protagonist, whom happen to be a paraplegic. They chase him down in a car, and nick of time saved, as is usually the case.
It's also interesting to keep in mind too, because this character's like 12, 11 or 12.
Yes, he's Yeah, I don't think he's a teenager. Yeah, he's middle school age.
He's like really young, and so I feel like that makes this, I don't know, a lot crazier that this guy was so prepared to run this kid off of the road and.
Oh yeah, and he's a reverend.
Yeah.
And he seems to take that very seriously.
He does.
When you see him throughout the film. So it is a really like brutal transition.
Mm-hmm.
You know that he wants to kill this character. You know that he wants to kill the people who are aware that he is the werewolf, which of course is what defines the climax of the film. Is that kind of confrontation. And of course, this incident here is Marty being chased down with the car is what is the catalyst for belief with other people. So when Marty gets chased down with the car, that's what helps his sister and his uncle believe that this person is after him. Whether or not it's a werewolf, you know, that's still up to debate, at least in the uncle's position. They see paint marks on the vehicle, or on the wheelchair, that match the vehicle that the Reverend drives. And so they're able to put together, okay, well maybe this person is a bad guy. And that's what leads into our titular scene, the silver bullet scene, because the two children give their silver necklaces, pendants that they have, to their Uncle Red and get him to go to a local smith to have a silver bullet made. And that's where we're introduced to the Judd Crandall of Pet Sematary character, which is the gun shop owner, who's got a very, like, you know, withery voice of an old man, holds his glasses up to look at things like this, you know. Very interesting guy, and with nearly no prompting, he mentions werewolf, while the uncle is vehemently denying that up and down. He's trying to give every other excuse in the book for a silver bullet, you know, like a gag thing, relating it to the Lone Ranger and things like that, because of course the Lone Ranger used silver bullets. The most story development that we get really is all within the third act. The first two acts are pretty slow. You just see a lot of people getting murdered. And there is a lot of death in this movie. A lot of people get killed in this movie, especially for the scale of the town.
Well, within like not even 5 minutes, you get a guy that's beheaded. So
yeah,
that's how the movie starts. It's just a guy walking down the railroad track and, oh, there goes his head.
Yep. Which they kind of try to say that his intentions are to kill, like, sinful people.
Yeah, but he only mentions the one girl.
Yeah. But the other people he kills are not really good people.
No,
either.
yeah.
The first one's an alcoholic, and the second one is, like, an aggressive, like, abusive alcoholic. So they kind of hint at the fact that it's supposed to be some religious thing. But then when he goes for Marty, he throws that off, and that's, I'm assuming, because Marty knows who he is.
Yeah, I mean, there's literally no other reason. He's a 12-year-old kid in a wheelchair.
Yeah, and
like,
he goes after him as a human, so that's another thing. Because it seems like the only cognizant thing he can do as a werewolf is just choose who he goes after.
Which he was going to kill Marty as a werewolf.
Well, but he got shot in the eye.
He did get shot in the eye, but he was very well prepared to go after Marty.
And it was the being shot in the eye that made him mad enough to go after him as a human.
Right. I do think at that point it was more just coincidence that Marty was by himself in the middle of the night, more than anything, because there still was no reason for him to go after Marty other than plot.
Yeah.
I mean, because something
Which
had to
there
happen.
isn't a whole lot of.
No.
Because, like, while all of this is going on, and this is important to note, but it's fairly insignificant to the true story of the film. So while the primary plot is going on, there's also this secondary plot of the police and this mob of townsfolk who want to get to the bottom of these killings that are going on.
Yeah.
And that kind of holds one of my favorite parts of the movie in it, and one of the members of the cast, but for the most part it's completely needless. You don't need the scenes at all. You could cut all of the scenes out with the sheriff and the townsfolk and stuff like that, and it wouldn't affect the story of what's going on with Marty and Red at all. It wouldn't happen. It wouldn't matter. There are two things that tie it in, and that's the barkeep that gets killed has a baseball bat with the word Peacekeeper written on it, and when the angry mob is attacked and killed, the werewolf gets the bat, and the little girl sees it later on. So that ties that together. And then the other thing that ties it together is just the fact that the Reverend is so dissociated from the entire situation, and he seems to only be interested in the mob when they're going after whatever they're going after. Like, he begs them to stop. But that could also just be because he doesn't want to have to kill them.
I don't think he did, because shortly after that there was a funeral scene, and obviously
he seemed deeply contrite, and he was having
he was having a very hard time, and then it turned into a nightmare sequence, so he
had hallucinations, like really bad hallucinations.
So he felt bad about it, but I think it was because all of those people didn't necessarily deserve to die. It was just that they were after him, and he felt he had no other choice but to take them all out.
And that's why, as they're all leaving to go out into the bog or wherever there's a lot of fog wherever they go, but as they're going out there, the Reverend is chasing after them and asking them, or imploring them to stop, and saying, no, don't go, don't do this. But yes, I just felt it was important to note, bringing up that little side plot, because there is more to the story than just this kid and uncle and the sister. It's really just there to fill time, to make it feature length. It's not there to tell much story at all. The best part of that is, if you've ever seen the movie The Stepfather, there's an actor in it who's a really great horror actor. I mean, he's generally a great actor, but his name's Terry O'Quinn, and he is the sheriff in the movie. And so that's the best part of the whole film, is seeing him play that character. You know, his performance and Gary Busey's performance, which is, as always, just a completely crazy performance.
I loved him.
Gary Busey's amazing in everything.
So
He's entertaining as hell no matter what you see him in. Even Ginger Dead Man, he is entertaining. Their performances are reason enough to watch this movie. They're very good. But it's just worth a note, because, there is more to the plot than just that. Back to the main thing that we were talking about, you have your titular scene with them making the silver bullet, and then from there, it's just the climax.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much it. And the climax plays out about how you would expect. The sad thing is aside from mentioning Halloween, they don't really show you any Halloween.
No. Well, the climax happens, and it's 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, it's very late in the morning.
They don't do anything for Halloween, because they're sitting waiting for the werewolf to come get them so that they can kill him.
Yeah, and I doubt that many people in the city would be doing anything either, because the werewolf is out killing people. So they'd probably be very afraid of being murdered, as one would be.
Yeah.
It takes place inside of a house, as you stated. It's just the 2 children and the uncle, because the parents have gone away. The uncle tricked them into leaving. They're just kind of waiting it out, and they get to the point where they think nothing's going to happen, so they're going to disband and go to bed very, very late in the evening. And it's when they choose to do that that the werewolf attacks. And, there's a fight sequence and a struggle between the 3 characters and the werewolf. The kids obviously win. The werewolf gets shot with the silver bullet. After they lose it once and then have to fish it out of a vent, they are able to shoot the werewolf. And that's after watching a very hilarious, crazy fight scene with Gary Busey and a werewolf. Which is the reason to watch this movie, if no other reason at all, is you get to see Gary Busey fight a werewolf.
Yeah. It's pretty wild.
Yeah, it's awesome. But what are your general opinions? What do you got going on about this movie?
Okay, so I was super into it. If nothing else, because it was so silly to me. It does take itself very seriously, which is fine. Yeah. But for some reason, just to me, it came off incredibly silly.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And maybe it's just because it hasn't aged well. I don't know, but it just felt very.
I don't think it intends to be The Shining.
Right. So, I mean, yeah, well, like you said earlier, it wasn't necessarily a big theatrical event. It was just this movie was made, and here you go. So it definitely does not feel like it was meant to be anything big or special. The biggest thing about it is that Stephen King wrote the novella and the screenplay for it. Woo! And that's really about it. Otherwise, it's just a simple little werewolf story. It's set in this podunk town in the middle of nowhere, really.
Yeah, I'm assuming Maine.
That's a good assumption.
Yeah. You know, if I had to go out on a limb, the novella that it's based on is called Cycle of the Werewolf, and I certainly recommend reading it. I recommend watching the film as well.
Regardless of it being silly to me, like, I was thoroughly entertained.
It's good.
Like, that's why
It's
because like I was super into it, and you just out of the blue were like, well, this movie's almost over, and I was like shocked. I was like, excuse me, I don't want it to be over yet. I need more.
Yeah, it's kind of a bummer.
But like once the third act hits, it's just like zoom, and then it's done. It's like, okay, well, cool, I guess. That was satisfying enough. You got the werewolf, great. All right.
It was very akin to like reading a Goosebumps book, like the feeling of like how the story plays out and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Just very short and sweet, and not a lot of meat there.
For what it is, it's very well designed. It's very scary.
With all the limitations they had, they did a great job.
It is. It's very intimidating and crazy, and all I can see is him turning back into a human, and it's just like you hear all like the bones popping and cracking back into place. And, it's gross. I'd watch it again.
Oh yeah, 100%. I watch it.
It definitely.
I watch it all the time.
Yeah, it feels like one of those movies that like you're just flipping through the channels and it's on. It's just like, oh, okay, and you just sit there.
Those are the best ones.
Yeah.
Because the expectation isn't like super high. Or
Exactly.
anything like
Yeah.
that. You're just like, I want to be entertained.
Yep.
All right. Well, I definitely recommend this movie.
I do too. It's good.
Yeah. So go out and watch it if you get the chance. If you find it streaming somewhere. Or find a DVD copy of it or a Blu-ray.
It does still play on television. I was actually looking. You were looking for all the information on it, and it actually says that it's about to start showing on several channels within the next few days of us recording this. So
well,
it still airs on television. You just search for it.
It's a good movie. But aside from that, I think this week's track pick will probably be Wretched Spawn by Cannibal Corpse. Do you have one?
I have a movie.
Okay, what movie?
Monster House.
All right, Monster House.
If we'll stick with like the Halloween, easily entertaining movies.
Always Halloween, always. It's a good movie.
It is.
I've seen it several times. It's good.
Yes.
All right. Well, appreciate you guys watching. Like, subscribe, and hit that bell. Let us know if there's anything that you want us to improve about the show. We're always open to the criticism. We really want you to be involved in what's going on.
Yeah.
So yeah, have a great night. Love you guys. Thanks for coming.